He had everything handed to him: private jets, designer clothes, and a last name that opened doors before he even knocked. But inside he was crumbling, failing every single test, drowning in a profound and very expensive silence. And I mean everyone had given up on him. His teachers, his classmates, and even his own very powerful father. Until one day, in the quietest, most forgotten corner of the school, a janitor, a black woman that nobody ever really looked at, said something that hit him harder than any lesson ever had. He thought she was just cleaning the floors. He had no idea that she was about to clean out everything he thought he knew. His name was Lucas Reed. He's the only son of Charles Reed, a tech tycoon whose name graced the cover of Forbes as regularly. As the changing of the seasons, Lucas grew up surrounded by private jets, personal chefs, and birthday parties with celebrities as his guests. But for all that he had, one very important thing, was missing: purpose. At 17, Lucas attended one of the most elite and most expensive private high schools in Atlanta. Not because he had earned his way in, but because the name Reed opened doors like a golden key. No tests, no interviews, just a wire transfer and a reputation that did all the talking for him. Inside those grand, marble hallways that were lined with the oil-painted portraits of a series of a powerful, very white alumni, Lucas was known for three things: his breathtaking arrogance, his expensive clothes, and his spectacular, very public academic failure. His grades were a joke. His teachers passed him, not out of a merit, but out of a fear of his father's influence. And he didn't care. Why would he? One day, he would inherit an empire. What could a simple GPA do that his last name couldn't? He mocked his teachers, he ignored his classmates, and he smirked his way through the lectures like they were all beneath him. When the school counselor had once, and with a great and very misplaced sense of a professional duty, called him in about his failing grades, Lucas had just leaned back in his chair and had said, "I could buy this entire school if I wanted to, and what grade is going to change that?" The quote had spread like a wildfire, but no one, not a single person, had dared to confront him. Everyone, from the faculty to the students, tiptoed around Lucas Reed. No one wanted to risk losing the very generous and very necessary Reed family donation. At home, things weren't much better. His father, Charles, was a man of a stone. Cold, calculated, a self-made billionaire who didn't believe in excuses, not even from his own blood. The silence that had followed had hit like a punch. Charles wasn't bluffing. He was dead serious. The next day, Lucas had showed up at school like nothing had happened. He had pulled into the faculty parking lot in his sleek, black Audi, a small gift from his last birthday, and he had walked the halls like a runway model. Some of the students had stared at him in envy, others in a quiet and very real disgust. But one pair of eyes, they didn't look away. Hers, an older black woman, likely in her 50s, was mopping the floor near the side entrance. Her posture was upright, her eyes were quiet, but they were also alert. Her uniform was a little wrinkled, but her presence was not. Lucas hadn't noticed her. To him, she was invisible. She was just the janitor. She was just ... background noise. School began to weigh on him, more tests, more failing grades. And then the final blow. His dad had cut off his credit cards. He had taken the car. And he had forced him to take the school bus, just like everybody else. One of those bitter and very cold mornings, he had passed the janitor in the hallway. And for the very first time, he had noticed that she was whispering something to herself as she cleaned. "The only true wisdom," she was saying, "is in knowing that you know nothing." Lucas had stopped. He had chuckled, a short and very ugly sound. But something in her words had stung him. She had just turned and had walked away as if nothing at all had happened. But Lucas ... Lucas had kept thinking about her. Lucas had climbed the steps of the school building that day with his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. Everything had felt different. It was colder. It was smaller. Gone was the smug and very arrogant energy he had once used to carry himself. Through the long and very intimidating hallways, now he walked fast. He walked quietly. and he tried not to feel the heavy and very real weight of the stairs. That morning, he had gotten his literature test back. A plain white envelope folded in half with a cold and very final finality to it. He had opened it with the usual and very low expectation. Maybe a low C, maybe another, and very pathetic mercy grade. The grade was 18 out of 100, and scrawled in a red, very angry ink at the bottom were the words, "Did you even read the passage?" Lucas had just stared at the page, and he had blinked, and he had laughed, a nervous and very hollow sound. But no one was laughing with him. More tests had come that week. Math, 24%. History, 31%. Biology, a solid and very pathetic 0. It wasn't funny anymore. The school counselor had called him in again, and this time her own voice wasn't so gentle. "Lucas," she had said, "you are academically at risk. I am not talking about your behavior anymore. I am talking about a complete and very final failure. Statistically," she had added, "you are at the very bottom of the entire and very prestigious senior class." And that had shut him up. Later that day, as he had left her office, he had ducked out through the back entrance, just to avoid being seen. And there she was again. The janitor. She was scrubbing up a soda spill right near the cafeteria. And she had seen him, and she had smiled, a polite and very gentle smile. He had stopped. He had bitten his cheek then. That one had hurt. She had studied him then for a long silent moment. The next morning, Lucas had showed up before the sunrise. The school building was still asleep, wrapped in a thick and very beautiful and very silent fog. He had walked so slowly through the back entrance, gripping the new and very clean notebook that she had given him like it was something sacred. And he had found her, Evelyn, in the east wing of the building, polishing the long marble floors. With these slow and very precise circles, she was wearing a simple and very old pair of earbuds and was humming something soft. Maybe it was a gospel song. Lucas had stood there awkwardly for a long, silent moment. Before he had finally stepped forward, Evelyn had paused, and she had removed one of her earbuds, and she had looked at him so calmly. "I remember," she had said, "and I also said that it would not be easy." Lucas had smiled a faint and very real and very grateful smile. "How long have you been working here?" he had asked. 3 years, she had said, "and before that at other schools." "And before that?" he had asked. She had paused then, and she had looked him dead in the eye. "Before that," she had said, "I was a college professor, taught English literature and philosophy." His own handsome eyes had widened. Why would you leave that for this?" Evelyn had folded her cleaning cloth so slowly, and she had answered him without a single solitary trace of a shame. "Sometimes," she had said, "life takes everything that you thought was yours, and it leaves you with nothing. Nothing. But what you know, and I," she had finished, "I still know how to teach." Lucas had just nodded, completely and utterly overwhelmed. For the very first time in his entire and very privileged life, he had seen someone who was truly and completely strong without having any of the power. So he had asked, "Where do we start?" "I tried reading some of the stuff last night. I don't even know how to begin." "And that," she had said, "is the first real truth. Pride, Lucas, it fools you into thinking that you already know. You can finally admit that you don't. That is when you can start to learn for real." "I can read," Lucas had muttered, a little defensively. "I did not say that you couldn't," she had replied, "but I am not talking about reading the words. I am talking about understanding what is written between the lines." She had then pulled a battered old notebook from her own simple bag. "Every single morning," she had said, "before your first class, you will meet me here for 1 hour. And every single evening, after I have finished my cleaning, you will sit and you will write. You will write about what you have learned, what you have felt, and what you have understood. There will be no grades. It's just honesty." Lucas had opened the notebook. It was full of a series of blank and very intimidating pages. An invitation. A challenge. What if I fail again? He had asked. Then she had said, you will finally be doing it right. The days rolled by. Strange and very beautiful and very sacred rhythm began to form. Lucas would show up early every single morning, and Evelyn would greet him not with a ceremony, but with a series of simple and very profound questions. What did that sentence make you feel? Why do you think this character stayed so silent? Can you tell me what courage sounds like? She didn't lecture him. She provoked him. And Lucas, he began to see the world differently. The books, they stopped feeling like a chore. The sentences, they started to pull at his gut. He was learning how to feel what the words were trying so desperately to say. The notebook, it began to fill up. Not with the right answers, but with his own very real thoughts, with his own very new reflections, and with his own very old fears. He wrote about his father. He wrote about the pressure. And he wrote about how angry he was at being so completely and so utterly empty all the time. And Evelyn, she read every single solitary word. One night, as he was writing in the empty, in very silent cafeteria, two of the other, more popular boys from his class had walked by, laughing loudly. One of them, a star football player named Josh, had nudged the other and had said, "Look at little Reed now. He's writing love letters to the janitor." Lucas had clenched his jaw, his whole body tensing, ready to react. Evelyn had just gently, and with a quiet and very powerful grace, placed her hand on his shoulder and had whispered, "You do not measure the depth of the ocean with a shallow ruler, Lucas." And he had looked up at her then, and that one single line had hit him deeper than any insult ever could. A few days later, Lucas had showed up to their evening study session with someone new. "This is Priya," he had said. "She is in my biology class, and she needs a little help with her writing." Evelyn had just smiled. "Well," she had said, "it looks like we've got ourselves a class." More and more of the other students had come then, quietly, cautiously. The word had spread. The word that someone at this school was actually helping. Not grading, not judging, but teaching. The abandoned old library had turned into their own secret classroom. They would read, they would write, they would debate, and sometimes they would even cry. It was beautiful, and it was dangerous. One afternoon, Evelyn was called into the office. The assistant principal had spoken to her in these cold and very corporate tones. "Miss Wallace," she had said, "we have received some concerns. The parents are asking why their children are spending so much of their time with the janitorial staff after hours. It is unorthodox." "I am teaching," Evelyn had replied simply. "That is not your certified role here," the woman had said. "It is not in your job description." Evelyn had just stared at her. "Neither is saving a child's life," she had said. "But I did that anyway." The assistant principal hadn't answered. But Evelyn had known what was coming. Lucas had heard about it the next day. "They told you to stop?" he had asked. "Yes," she had said. "That's insane. You are helping." "I know," she had interrupted him. "But that is what the systems do, Lucas. They do not attack what is broken. They attack what is working, if it wasn't meant to work that way." Lucas had clenched his fists. "I am going to tell my dad," he had said. "I will go to the board. I will go public." "Not yet," Evelyn had said firmly, as she had placed her hand on his shoulder. "Your own voice, Lucas. It needs to be strong enough to stand on its own first, not as a Reed, but as a Lucas." And he had just nodded. He'd understood. The revolution had already begun. It had happened faster than he had expected. Lucas had walked into the garage after school, drenched from the rain, and he was gripping a paper with a bold red A on it, the very first one he had earned all year. The essay was titled "The Courage to Unlearn," and his teacher's comment, it read, "You have found your voice." He had wanted to show it to his father just once, not for his approval, but for the truth. He had found Charles standing beside a brand new and very expensive electric sports car, speaking to someone over his Bluetooth about a series of new and very profitable acquisitions. "Dad," Lucas had said as he held out the paper, "I want to show you something." Charles had taken it with a blank and very indifferent face, and he had scanned the title, and he had raised a single and very condescending eyebrow. "Is this a joke?" it asked. "It's a real essay," Lucas had said, "from my English class. I got an A." Lucas's father had said, "This is a diary entry about your feelings. This is not academic. It is sentimental. It is about a growth," Lucas had said. "It is about learning." Charles had just tossed the paper onto the passenger seat of the new car. "Who taught you to write like this?" he had asked. Lucas had hesitated, and then he had said it clearly. "Evelyn," he had said. "The janitor." A long and very profound silence, and then Charles had stepped forward, his own voice now a low and very full of a venom sound. "You are telling me," he had said, "that you are learning from someone who mops the floors." "She was a professor before," Lucas had said. "She is a failure now," Charles had cut in. "And that is all that matters." Lucas's fists had clenched. "She has done more for me," he had said, "than you ever have. If you do not stop seeing her," Charles had warned, "you will lose everything. Your money, your car, your name." "Maybe," Lucas had said, his own voice now trembling, "maybe I need to lose it all, to figure out who I really and truly am." Charles had just stared at him so coldly. "Pack your things," he had said. "You are done." The announcement was posted in a bold and very dramatic letters at the school's main entrance. The senior speech contest was the final assignment of the year, and the stakes were high. Scholarships, university recommendations, and a very public and very prestigious recognition. For most of the students, it was just another hoop to jump through. But for Lucas, it was something else entirely. It was a war. That same morning, he had found out that Evelyn had been fired. Early, quietly, and with no warning. It escorted her to the gate, and there had been no chance to say goodbye. They'd said it was because of budget cuts, but everyone knew better. She had left without a fanfare. Lucas had just sat in the empty and now very lonely cafeteria, his own notebook open, his own hands now shaking. He had stared at the pages that were so full of her words, of her corrections, of her questions. Learning is a transformation. Pride is a trap, disguised as a protection. You do not need a permission to become someone new. He had closed the notebook then, and he had opened a new one. And he had written, not for the grades, not for the applause, but for the truth. The night of the speech contest had arrived. The auditorium was packed. Parents were in their expensive coats, the students in their neatly pressed suits, and the college scouts were in the back row with their clipboards. Lucas stood behind the curtain, and he was wearing a plain navy blue shirt and a pair of dark, simple jeans. There were no flashy shoes, no last name pinned to his chest. There was just him and his story. His name was called, and he stepped onto the stage. The room fell quiet. He looked across the crowd, and he began. "My name is Lucas Reed," he said, "and some of you know me as the kid who wasted a golden ticket, the kid who didn't care, kid who failed. They say that I had everything, but I didn't have the one thing that mattered. I didn't have someone who believed in me until she showed up." He paused. "She wasn't my teacher, not officially. She wasn't paid to help me. She had no office. She had no authority. She just had a mop and a heart that was big enough to see through all of my anger." He scanned the audience. "She taught me how to read, between the lines in the books, and in life. She taught me how to write. She taught me how to think. She taught me how to listen. She didn't just clean the floors of this school. She cleared the fog in my head. The air in the room had shifted. People were leaning forward, but she was fired," he said. "She was silenced. Because the systems, they don't like it when someone from the bottom starts to make a real difference. And so today," he said, "I am not speaking to impress you. I am speaking to honor her." He held up the notebook. "She told me that a real learning was a transformation. That a real winning isn't about being rich or being powerful. It is about becoming someone who is worth remembering." And then his own voice had softened. "She might not be here right now," he said, "but she is in every single word that I am saying. So, what does it mean to win in life? It means waking up. It means letting go of your name. It means finding your own true truth. It means using it to lift others up. A single, solitary clap, and then another." And then the entire room had exploded into a massive and very heartfelt and very emotional applause. A standing ovation. There were tears. Even some of the faculty were crying. And from the very back of the room, a woman with a simple and very beautiful headscarf and a pair of quiet and very wise eyes had wiped a single, solitary tear from her own eye, and she had smiled. Evelyn. She had come back so quietly just to see him shine. And Lucas, he was not a read on that night. He was his own name,